Hello, I'm Christy Duncan, and I'm delighted to be chatting today with Natalie Willems-Rosman, who's Managing Director of Merchant Services Sales at Bank of America, based in London. Welcome, Natalie.
Thanks so much, Christy.
I'm so excited for this discussion today. We're going to take a deep dive into the role of Treasury in the evolution of the payments industry. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this, Natalie. But can we start first just by talking a little bit about what your role is at Bank of America?
Absolutely, Kirsty. So I'm the Merchant Sales Executive for Bank of America Merchant Services. I've been with Bank of America for about 8 years. And prior to that, I've held multiple leadership roles at other banks. My current role is very much focused on that merchant services journey, so helping large corporate customers seamlessly process all of their payments, whether it's online, whether it's in store, and leading that business for Bank of America in Europe.
Fantastic. What a great role. So interesting. And there's so much going on there at the moment. Natalie, when we talk about careers and payments, we're really talking about a really broad spectrum. If it's cards, if it's merchant services, treasury, so many different aspects. And recently, we're starting to see those worlds begin to merge, due in part to things like consumer trends moving into B2B or payment types, merging like real-time payments being used for e-commerce, et cetera. So you've had this amazing career with leadership positions across Bank of America, RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, and ABN AMRO. And you've also managed payments operations teams and led payments platform migrations, and you've managed payables, receivables, FX, so much in your role. And now you've taken on the role of CEO of B of A Merchant Services in Europe. Having seen both the Treasury and the merchant services sides of the business, Nellie, how, in your opinion, has the treasurer's role evolved, and why does this evolution matter?
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, that's a great summary, Kirsty, of my career. Indeed, throughout those years, I have seen anything from operations to sales on the banking side and the bank payment side, and then moved into that card world. And initially, when I made that change, which was about 4 years ago, going into cards, I thought I knew a lot about payments before that, and then I jumped into cards, and it was a completely new world for me. It really opened my eyes to, wow, this is another world. There's so many things, so many different things that matter. So that was, I thought, a very interesting change, and something that has delivered brought a lot to my personal career. But I also think it makes me a lot better working with customers as well. And what we've seen with our client base, and of course at Bank of America, we work very closely with the Treasury community. I'm actually seeing the treasurers going through that same type of journey. So 8 years ago, when I was working with treasurers, they were very focused on making sure that their payroll and all their wholesale payments, their supplier payments were as effective as possible. And then about 4 years ago, I started seeing suddenly also the consumer payouts being added to that. So treasurers started to get involved. Okay, if we do have payouts to our customers, whether it is individual merchants selling things through websites, or whether it is paying bloggers because they're posting content on your website, we started to see that whole payout journey being added to the treasurer's role. And the treasurer is the center of excellence for payments. So that was a new world where they needed to think about B2C payments. But now, and considering we've had the pandemic, we're just seeing more and more treasurers thinking about, okay, now it's time to focus more on the incoming side of payments, optimizing our incoming workflow, working capital position. And that's where we're seeing a lot more interest from treasurers thinking about merchant services. I think, why is it interesting? I think it just shows how all of our roles in payments are evolving. Nothing is ever standing still. It shows how important it is to keep learning, to change your perspectives in payments. So I think it's just a very interesting development, and something that just shows how much how much there is to do still in this particular sector.
I love that, the Treasury being the center of excellence for payments within an organization. That's insightful. So this is a great kind of payments evolution, payments journey for treasurers, Natalie. Why do you think that treasurers historically have not thought about merchant services?
So I think typically, you look at the treasurer, they have so much on their plate. They need to make sure that their day-to-day positions are well managed. They need to understand what kind of flows are coming in and going out. I think there have been incredible amount of challenges over the last years. From that payment side, they've been looking at how do we optimize our payments, how do we get rid of manual payments, how do we get smoother with our reconciliation. So there's been an incredible amount of challenges to tackle. So that's really been the focus. But I think that's where we are right now, that a lot of companies and treasurers, they have introduced software that makes that a lot more seamless. They've been optimizing that over the years. And suddenly that's shifting a focus to looking more on the incoming side. And if you look at the pandemic, suddenly you saw a big shift from payments done through maybe in-store before and shifting to online. We've seen suddenly big trends change, and that's also highlighted the treasurers. Maybe there are things that we could optimize on the incoming side. Maybe there are things we could be doing better in merchant services. So that's, I think, really triggered the attention for the treasurer to start looking more on the incoming side of working capital.
Wow, so interesting to watch this kind of shift in the treasurer's perspective. I want to talk a little bit about data and the evolution of data and data analytics in recent years, especially when it comes to helping treasurers identify risks as well as opportunities. Can you talk about what sort of data can be provided that could be useful to them, and how it's evolved over the last few years?
I mean, data, I think, is the buzzword of our industry. There are so many conversations about how to use data, how to optimize data. And I think especially in the merchant world, there's a huge amount of very, very valuable data. You've got great information on who's buying your goods, where they're buying it from, when they're buying it. And a lot of that, of course, is very interesting to the marketing department. So you've got the marketing department all over that. But actually, this is also really interesting for treasurers to start paying a bit more attention to, because through merchant services, you usually get real-time updates about how much you sold that day, which currencies you sold that in. And treasurers really care about real-time positioning, knowing how much, what's my position today, but especially also looking into the future, like where do I think my cash flow is in 5 days or in 1 month's time. Using all that historic information that you get from your sales data can really help, that positioning for treasurers. So I think it's a great tool. If you use it, if you use all the data that's available, you use it in the right way. There's really a lot that every part of the organization can take in terms of using that to their benefit. I think another very interesting side, what we're seeing to data, is the using it for fraud prevention. Tools are getting so much smarter from an artificial intelligence perspective as well, to spotting the transactions that are fraudulent, the ones that you don't want to be honoring. And again, the treasury is all about risk and protecting the business and making sure, all of their payments are done safely and securely. So again, this type of data really is the friend of, the Treasury Department, and something that is incredibly valuable to get close to.
Yeah, I love that. Certainly fraud and risk are big, especially with the increase in e-commerce in the last couple of years over the pandemic. So much that sits on that treasurer's desk for sure. So we've talked about the evolution of data and data analytics and treasurers kind of shift to look at a new focus of incoming payments. As a treasurer who might be shopping for a merchant services provider, can you talk, Natalie, about what they might be looking for when they're looking at different merchant services solutions?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And what I see in my role, where I speak to many different clients, day in, day out, I see there's a really different level of closeness to merchant services. And I talk to so many people who are only just starting that journey. They're only just starting to make online payments, or they're only just starting to get involved because maybe it was more like the procurement department or the IT or the marketing department who is looking at that side of the payments part. So some of these people are very much at the beginning of that journey, but others are incredibly at the forefront, and they know everything, and they know exactly what they're looking for, and they know their authorization rates, they know how to optimize that, they know where they want to get to. So it really depends who you're talking to, I guess, what the level of knowledge is. But what everyone is looking for is for solutions that are simple, that are reliable, that are and ultimately that are secure. And that doesn't change whether you're on the Treasury side or whether you're on the merchant side. That's what you're looking for. You're also looking for solutions that will make the customer journey as smooth as possible and as simple as possible. So key things that we always advise our clients to look out for is finding out a bit more about your technology and finding out which partners can integrate seamlessly into your technology. Which partners provide that reliable service, but which partners can also help optimize that authorization rate, because every percent that you can increase that's a percentage of sales, and that is a lot of money. So those are the types of things we advise clients on. Clearly, if we start getting into the merchant services jargon, you have gateways, you've got 3D Secure, you've got a lot of things to think about. But I would say, I guess, having come from that treasury role before and being now on the merchant side, a lot of the themes translate, a lot of the logic translates, and there's a lot you can do to ask the right questions and bring the right solutions on board.
Yeah, I love the way you frame it as a journey that the corporates go through from the beginning through the learning stage to get to understand what solutions might actually meet all of their needs and deliver that ultimate customer experience, which is so critical these days.
Mm.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about new trends, and if there's new trends or solutions that you're seeing in the market which could help to bridge the gap between treasury and merchants.
Yeah, and sometimes in the payments world, it's so hard to keep up with all the trends, right? There's so much happening, and it's important to see what will stick, what's here to stay, and what is really going to change the customer's life and our life, whether it comes down to online or in-store checkout. I think one of those key evolutions that we're seeing is that ACH and payment types that were traditionally more used in the business-to-business space, or maybe customer-to-customer space, but weren't maybe real-time. We're seeing now that they are more real-time. They are a lot more suitable to be used in the e-commerce space, because they give instant confirmation of funds and of payment. So real-time payments is a big theme for e-commerce. It's not that easy always to just use real-time payments, right? You have to make sure it connects nicely to the technology, that it's very seamless when someone is checking that out. So that's, for instance, where Pay by Bank comes in, which is really something we've seen in Europe, built on the basis of open banking. So Pay by Bank will really help clients to choose their own bank and make payment from account to account. maybe rather than going through a credit card. So that really starts getting to the Treasury's territory, because suddenly the payments are coming in, one by one on the bank accounts, and reconciliation becomes important. So that pulls it much more into the realm of the treasurer. So I think that's definitely a very important one. And with that comes a lot of focus on how do you continue to reconcile? How do you continue to make sure that that isn't a really manual effort? And that's where technology we have nowadays, and we offer that as well through our services here, by really using artificial intelligence, having intelligent matching software can again help treasurers a lot with managing all these receivables, knowing who paid you for what, even if it came in a different currency that you were expecting, or someone is paid in installments, which is also a big trend now, right? So managing all those payment flows effectively really can help. Artificial intelligence can really help with a new development like that as well.
I love it. It's catapulting us into the next generation of payments and getting us into that real-time thing, but also things on the horizon that are gaining a whole lot more attention and participation from the consumer side. Certainly is this the buy now, pay later, the installment payments, and that certainly would have a big impact on reconciliation and other concerns. Fantastic. Wow, this has been a really insightful and enlightening conversation, Natalie. Thank you for sharing. We could talk about this stuff all day, and I know you've got a million things packed in your head that I'd love to share, but unfortunately we're kind of out of time. But as a last question, I'd like to ask you something very, very different, and that is your career. You've had this fantastic career across a number of organizations in the payment space. If you were to give some career advice to the rising stars in our audience, what 2 or 3 pieces of career advice would you share?
I think it's a really good question. I have to really think about that, Kirsty. I think there's 2 things I would say. One would be, don't be afraid to choose the road less traveled. Throughout my career, when I joined in banking, I had many peers who, all seemed to follow the same pattern. And I just decided to always do things slightly different. So I stepped into operations because I really wanted to have the chance of a leadership role. And, I got a lot of questions, why would you go to operations? And I just felt that that was a great place to learn more about leadership. And within a very short space of time, I was leading a team of up to 60 people. And you don't really get those opportunities if you're maybe in other parts of the business. So very early on, by making those slightly different choices that maybe were a little bit less obvious to others. I did that, for instance, by coming to the UK. I'm originally Dutch. I did that also when we were in a takeover situation with RBS. We had most of my peers went a different route, and I just decided to go and work for RBS, which was a lot less route traveled for the Dutch people back then. But all those different changes, and equally going to merchant services, have just given me so much more in my career, allow you to stand out a lot more from your peers. So that would really be one piece of advice. Don't be afraid of doing that. You might feel a bit odd. You might feel a bit, is this the right decision? But just, I would say, just go for it.
Love it.
And I think the other piece of advice would be, it's so important to keep learning and to keep challenging yourself and keep trying new things. And if you do feel you're in a situation where you're not learning that much, or you've seen it all, just give yourself a bit of a incentive to say, okay, it's time for a change. I need to do this. I'm sure it's going to be okay. And I think that's incredibly important, to just constantly keep yourself challenged and interested and enthusiastic about what you're doing. So those would be my two pieces of advice. I honestly hope that's helpful. But it's been great being part of this this network, Kirsty. And I think another great piece of advice is make use of what the network has to offer, of the knowledge that's out there with all these fantastic women that are in the network. So that would be my final thought to you. Thanks, Kirsty, for setting this up and getting us all connected.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we absolutely love building the network, building the community of women who are so supportive and share so freely, like you have done today, Natalie, with your fantastic career advice of not being afraid to take the road less traveled. That does help your career stand out from others and helps you in that pursuit of continuous learning. I love that, and building our networks always helps us to learn and to find opportunities and to help others in their career journeys. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. It's been an absolute fantastic discussion, and I love all of the things that you've shared about merchant services and treasury. It's such a fantastic, fascinating world. So thank you for sharing, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Kirsty.
Thank you also to our audience for joining us as we explore the exciting world of payments with Natalie and other inspiration women leaders from around the world of payments.